They no longer continue as under the same bruise assaults there for 6 months, and to no avail, yes. They are starting to change Victor attacks in neighboring areas attacking. I also didn't like that I was almost praising the Russian army, but after me the same words were confirmed by Vadim Skibitsky, general of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine. Well, actually, that they act as one. It's not that army, he was there as well. There are a lot of theses that this is not the same army that was in the 22nd and 23rd years. In the 24th, she entered in a completely different way. It's absolutely. So who said there that I'm some kind of narratives? I'm not narratives, I'm bringing you reality. It's just that if you have closed your blinders and come to this channel to hear what is not there. I don't understand your coming to this channel. Well, now let's move on to the review of the front, and at the end we'll talk in more detail about the news background. At the Svitovsky section of the front, active hostilities continue for Kislovka, and no longer on the outskirts of Kotlyrovka, but for Kotlyrovka itself. So, the footage was published yesterday, with regard to Kislovka. The Russian troops on the BMP drove over the intersection, because we said that there were just the same battles at the intersection. They managed to drive over the intersection, as a result, they were thrown back to their original positions. But now a gray zone has been added near the school building where it is located. And the second point is Kotlyrovka. In fact, the battle has already begun for it, because the enemy managed to advance to a depth of 480 meters and gain a foothold in the building. The situation looks like this. At the same time, they have gained a foothold along the railway, and at the same time they are launching attacks, as you remember. They tried to go around Kotlyrovka, they managed to stop without changes. Now there is a probing, there is a small landing of the southern Kotlyovka on it from the railway. But we will already consider this point if something changes significantly. There are attempts, so far it is possible to stop, but unfortunately the railway was completely taken. As for the school, this is this zone where the fighting was going on, we managed to throw it back to its original positions. But here we see that the enemy has already gone to Kotlyrovka, so the situation may change. We have said that he can bypass Kislovka from the south, he has just advanced along the forest belt, he has taken a building, well. Attacks are going to a small neighboring landing, due to it will be possible to strike from the south. So the enemy here continues to press in several directions, including attacks that are distracting. Moving on. There were several attacks of eastern turns and eastern Yampilovka in the Lyman direction. We managed to repel absolutely all attacks. So we do not record any changes here. As for Belogorovka, there were also several attacks, but all within the red zone, including with the support of tanks. The tank was hit, but later it burned down from the Russian side. Tank. Chesevyar direction. We do not record any significant changes. The main activity has now changed a little from the Russian side. That is, if before we spoke for the Orlov tract from Bogdanovka, if before we spoke for the Golyubovsky to Mortar Reserve. Then today we are specifically already talking for the city of ours itself. Specifically, we are talking about the Canal district. So what is the enemy doing here? Russian troops are transferring small assault groups, by the way, Vadim Skibitsky also, General Ger said. That their tactics are a little different, they do not move large forces, namely this tactic, well, that is, they do not use large forces. What we see is that small assault groups are using as much as possible. Yes, this allows you to dissipate as much as possible, and, due to this, be able to gain a foothold for some positions. Therefore, the tactics have been changed. And that's just the same Green Street, Garage Cooperative, attempts to go to the chapel cottages. And an attempt to move along the railway as well. Attacks were repelled along the railway. In general, they are now focusing on this area. That is, in simple words, go into a building where there are basements, or in the case of garages where there are pits. Zelenaya Street and Dachas. Priority, the main focus is on this section. So far, we are not fixing any changes, everything remains within the gray zone. Well, we are moving with you to the Pokrovsky direction, where the main changes begin, where the main pressure of the enemy is now. North of Q. We said yesterday that they are putting pressure on Arkhangelsk, if you remember my evening broadcast yesterday. For those who missed, new viewers, we said that they are putting pressure on Arkhangelsk. There is no point in bypassing them initially from the northeast, because the pressure is on, and there they said that this area is being clarified here. First of all, they are already in the center of Arkhangelsk, and secondly, north of Cheratina, so there is no need to go around. There is increasing pressure on Novoalexandrovka. Well, in general, there are already changes. The Russian troops, managed to capture a dacha village located north of the Q, and again they bet on a short shoulder, where there is an opportunity to catch on to gain a foothold, that is, not on open fields. They do not make this mistake. Like a thin Yasnobrodovka, they avoid open fields as much as possible, that is, they move with a short shoulder, there, where to cling, to gain a foothold. Therefore, the situation looks like this. Here they advanced on a front section, up to 172 kilometers wide, to a depth of 1 and 2 kilometers. Active hostilities continue. In fact, the plan is already visible. That is, there is a strong area in Osheretino, as you remember, of hydraulic builders, where there is a building, a garage cooperative, and, in general, Russian troops rested against it. It was really difficult for them to break through the Apu defense here, and it is being held very seriously, but they went around. Naturally, the smaller the plot remains, that is, you already understand how it ends. But according to the final, they are now pressing from Arkhangelsk in the direction of the fortification. And the surrender will also be pressing in the direction of the fortification, well, and Arkhangelsk, the rest of the northern part. That is, in order to close. Therefore, in principle, it makes no sense to predict anything here. The situation is clear here. This is just the same north of Arkhangelsk, and there is an exit to the positions at the height of 245. That is, to this area approximately. Closing. As for Novoalexandrovka, the fighting on the outskirts, so far we are stating this, is working in small assault groups. So far, probing is underway because the main emphasis is still being placed on completely closing Osheretina, which will allow them to just the same in this area where the maximum development of high-rise buildings, yes, to transfer even more substantial forces, larger forces, and the main focus is this area. But at the same time, yes, Novoalexandrovka also pushes along the railway, as well as west of Solovyev, and southwest of the Stavkov Cascade. But these are all small assault groups so far. The main focus will be. The main thing, I would say, is how Kirill Budanov and Vadim Skibitsky correctly reported before. The main offensive will begin in May-June, that is, in the second half of May, when they will get the maximum positions. Right now, they are getting close to them. Therefore, the work is being carried out in small assault groups. We go further, not Tylov-Pervomaysky, positional fighting continues today. They are pressing both in the direction of the central part of Netailov and south of Pervomaysky, and attempts to fortify the road that leads to Nevelskoye. Novelsky himself has oppositional fighting, without significant changes. The Yuzhnodotsky section of the Poroskovka-Novomykhailovka-Poroskovivka front. So we have already said with you that Russian troops are trying to advance to Proskovika, which means that along the open fields, and there is a small landing where they will try. And in general, there is already an attempt. Now let's take it apart. They advanced with the support of armored vehicles, which means a foot landing from the territory of the Garden Association Mashinostroidal. So actually, we see this corner where they moved out. We moved to the T-shaped intersection. So, let's follow the map now. The shots where the Apu drone copied where the enemy went on the attack, yes, moved to the T-shaped intersection. Managed to repel this attack, the remaining retreated to their original positions. But in general, they are making further attempts to go to the corresponding locality of Paraskoviivka. So far, everything remains within the gray zone. As for the area of the gray zone between Paraskoviivka and Pobeda, it should be added here that, first of all, there is already some activity in the Pobeda area. We talked about her a week ago. She switched to positionality again, but it was against the background of the attacks of Krasnogorovka. Now there is some activity from the Russian side again. That is, they will try to push in this sector of the front. conditionally in the direction of Paraskoviivka, so activity has resumed from the enemy side without significant changes. The Great Novoselkov direction is still active, fighting for the harvest. We continue. According to the frames that we have published to date, we do not record any changes, that is, everything remains within the red zone. Well, a similar situation with the work. Footage was published by the AFU of the 65th Brigade, where Russian troops, with the support of armored vehicles, advanced to storm the position, that is, the vector from the fortification, in the direction of the AFU position, but were blown up by a mine above. The landing was rather a foot landing. Then, on a U-turn, an armored vehicle is blown up by a BMP on a Mini, but the landing party retreats to its original position. Because there is no cover, well, and their positions have already been lit up. Therefore, it does not record any changes, but it is trying to put pressure on the forest belt to the west. It is designed to have positions for wide coverage. Although there are a number of Russian military officers, including Ribber, who paint this area in red. But the footage published by the AFU refutes all this. Here the situation is without significant changes. In other words, they are making a lot of attempts to transfer larger forces. But they manage to repel absolutely all of these attacks for the most part. This is the situation we have today.